If you are friends with Donald Trump, or work with Donald Trump, or you associate with Donald Trump in some way, Donald Trump will ultimately screw you. That is what everyone around him ultimately figures out. And it is the fate that is coming for JD Vance, who Donald Trump is already abandoning in the worst way possible for JD. And we are going to get into it all, because boy, is it so delicious as the walls close in on this White House. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button, because it goes a long way and supporting our work. Now, before we get into the post that Trump was blatantly mocking JD Vance and really attacking and undermining him, I want to start with someone who is calling out the inhumanity of Trump and Vance. And that's Jasmine Crockett sticking it to this administration right here.
I am telling you that they are doing just the opposite. I am telling you that we are a land of immigrants. It is time to do immigration right. It is time to make sure that we live up to the promise of this country. The idea that someone ran and said that I will get rid of the bad guys, yet we know more than 50% of the people that are currently being detained in custody have no criminal records at all. Zero, nada. So tell me why you are taking those people out of their communities. They are our neighbors. They are our friends. And frankly, they contribute to the fabric of this country. They are what make this country great, not your thuggish ICE agents who literally are spitting on our Constitution, as well as everything that we think patriotism ought to be. So with that, I want you to know, whether you are in Los Angeles, whether you are in Chicago, whether you are in any city in North Carolina, let me be clear. Democrats, specifically on the Oversight Committee, we got your back. I want you to know that this is about doing what's right. This isn't right or left for us. This is right or wrong.
JD Vance has really, in an attempt to model himself after Donald Trump, when he's gone on kind of the most disgusting immigration tirade I've seen, maybe out of anyone in this administration. And I know Stephen Miller is, like, really competitive in that space. Obviously, Donald Trump is the OG of being a racist bigot, spewing bile all the time, but JD Vance is uniquely gross because of his wife Anusha's family, and constantly undermining their heritage and just acting like an asshole all the time, which is exactly what JD Vance is. There's no other way to describe him. But he thinks if he throws a little shade at his wife, if he grabs Erica Kirk and certain ways in certain places, I don't know if it's because she was wearing leather pants and, you know, he's still thinking about those couches, but he thinks that's his way to win over Maga. And we know that's what JD Vance is after. There's nothing rounding JD Vance. He has no moral compass or guiding principles. He's just after power. But the bad news is for JD, the polls don't look good for you right now. And we gotta check them out before we get to what Trump posted. JD Vance's chances of being 2028 GOP nominee plunging, the likelihood that Vice President JD Vance will become the Republican Party's nominee for the 2028 presidential election is declining. According to polls. According to polling by McLaughlin and Associates, Vance's net lead over Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., in a hypothetical contest between them and other Republican figures, has decreased in recent months. Newsweek reached out to a representative for Vance and Trump Jr. by email to comment on the story outside of normal business hours. Why it matters? Because of the 22nd Amendment in the Constitution, which was added in 1951. Presidents can only serve 2 terms. We know Donald Trump can't serve an illegal third. While neither Vance or other GOP figures have announced their candidacy for 2028's race, Vance, the current vice president, has been widely tipped as a potential candidate in natural heir to continue Trump's agenda. But if his popularity is falling, this could signal that there has been a backlash to the Trump administration. According to polling, in August, Vance had a 20-point lead over Trump Jr., who is in second place with 36% of the vote share to Trump Jr.'s 16%. This lead actually increased to 28 points in September. However, in October, his lead decreased And while Vance still enjoyed a 28.38%, of the vote share, Trump Jr.'s 20% of the share meant that just a few weeks ago, Vance had a narrower 18-point lead. So the polling is getting a little tougher for J.D. Vance. And he certainly doesn't like that, because the only thing that he cares about is climbing for more power. J.D. Vance, again, I cannot say this enough, does not care about anything but his aspirations for the presidency, which is why, as Donald Trump talks about 2028, it seems like he's mocking J.D. Vance. But he actually is. And he did again in his most recent post. Author Jonathan Carroll has suggested that Donald Trump and Steve Bannon aren't serious about the president seeking an unconstitutional third term in the White House and are instead pushing the idea to troll the president's potential heir, Vice President J.D. Vance. Just now, Trump posted Trump 2028 yes on Truth Social again. So he's just doing this to mock Vance. It's good that we all can, as a country, agree that we hate J.D. Vance. We can't get a lot, you can't get behind a lot, but we can all get behind the fact that J.D. Vance sucks, and that I think everyone can support. But it is, in my opinion, Representative Vance's struggles recently in the polls of the fracturing Maga coalition that he certainly can't hold together, or else Donald Trump might have thrown a little support behind him. And one of the reasons that he can't is because of all the blood on his hands, but specifically over an issue that he's been pretty quiet about, which is the Epstein cover-up. Why hasn't Vance talked about it? He's always willing to defend Donald Trump, but not on that. Why not? What does he know, and what does he know will be held against him? Well, soon it will be more and more information as Ari Melber breaks down the latest in the Epstein cover-up right here.
The Trump administration, the DOJ, to turn over a ton of materials. I'm Ari Melber, lawyer, MS Now anchor. You can always subscribe here for my YouTubes and legal breakdowns. This is part 2 of a breakdown I've been doing about those documents. You can always find part 1 in the description, but part 2, I'm going to go into 2 of the document types they've requested. The internal Justice Department communications, which affects the Trump administration and those in the past, and the circumstances of Epstein's death. There are, according to my count, about 5 categories of these types of documents. And that matters because in the law, they're enumerated. So you could imagine a scenario where the DOJ tries to fight some of them. In the political environment right now, given the huge rebuke that Trump just lost, it is probably a bad idea in politics, let alone law, for them to say, hey, you get nothing. You could imagine a judge going, well, no, the DOJ is supposed to enforce the law, not violate it. Federal law, as of this new law that Trump signed, requires this material. But within it, there can be exceptions. And there are exceptions I think people would all agree upon. For example, something involving, hey, here's the document, but we've redacted the parts about a child or a minor. I don't think that would violate the spirit of the law, although depending on the redaction, sometimes they say, well, if it's pages and pages, are they lying? And for people who are cynical or skeptical, I think there's both out there, this is not the first rodeo. There have been huge clashes between the executive and Congress, including presidents who tried to sneak around and hide over big issues. It was an issue in the Nixon era. He ultimately lost. It was an issue with Reagan and Iran-Contra. It was an issue with the 9/11 Commission where they did get a lot of material, but huge sections of material regarding some foreign dealings, what was believed to be the history of the relationship with the Saudis, stayed redacted. So basically, you can look at this as a fight where there is precedent on the side of Congress getting this info and some precedent on the other side. I think there's some differences, and I'll get into that, but let's go into these categories. Internal DOJ communications is kind of a gold mine for whether there was a cover-up. And you might say, well, it seems like there's a cover-up. I mean, I've noticed on South Park and late night jokes, that's kind of the punchline. Obviously, it looks like a cover-up. But I don't mean it in the general sense that Trump has lied about these issues. He has. Or that Pam Bondi has reversed herself, meaning she either was lying when she said she had the client list, or she was lying when she said she didn't. But you don't need to be an investigative journalist to know that 2 opposite things cannot be true. So one of them was false, and given how much time she had to get her story straight, probably a lie. Not that she was confused, like someone handed her a file that said client list and she just never looked at it and didn't know she was lying. Unlikely, if we were even being fair. So the DOJ communications, though, could show, for example, whether there's material that doesn't prejudice an investigation, but can be released. And if you're thinking, well, why would they ever release stuff that is bad for them? There are a lot of reasons. There's what's called Freedom of Information Act requests. There's what I mentioned in those other history where the government does have to turn something over because otherwise they would be breaking the law and there could be sanctions for that. Or a judge makes them turn it over. Or a judge orders custodians to turn it over, meaning you don't just ask the person who wrote the email, hey, give us all your emails. Sometimes you go to the telecommunications provider or other people in the government. So there's a whole rich amount of detail here. Some of it gets pretty technical and dry about how this works, but if you got in that gold mine, you might see people emailing back and forth with the leadership, the Attorney General or Todd Blanche, the deputy who did this very controversial, misleading interview with Maxwell, Epstein's co-conspirator. You might see other people in DOJ talking about it without them on the chain. Like they did something, let's say, bad, and then other people in DOJ are concerned about it and saying, should we blow the whistle? Should we tell the watchdog? This seems wrong. Why are we firing the lead prosecutor on this case, Maureen Comey, when she was successful in getting justice for the victims? One of the only prosecutors doing that. And maybe you find out in the emails, and just hypothetical, that there was a reasonable explanation, that it didn't have to do with Epstein. And you might say, oh, as far as the Congress is concerned, okay, we have that. Or you might find something suspicious. That's just for the current Trump era. Then you go back to the prior Biden administration, and there's a big question here that haunts the Democrats who've made such a big deal out of this, even if you think they've gotten to a good result. And a lot of people have said Ro Khanna, who was the lead sponsor on the bill, was joined by Massey, a Republican. They got action. But wouldn't it have been easier to get that action when their party controlled the White House and DOJ? Why not go to Merrick Garland over the 4 years and get those materials? I recently actually asked Congressman Khanna about that, and he said, on the one hand, yes, fair question, fair to look back and say they should have done more with urgency. And two, he said it was a long process, and he went through his defenses of how basically he said that they were looking at getting that. Some of it was slowed down by a judge, etc. Then you go back further to the first Trump term, and those DOJ communications could look back at, say, Alex Acosta, who Trump promoted but was part of the original sweetheart deal that cut out victims, ultimately unlawfully, and helped Epstein and had this sort of very lenient house arrest type thing in Florida. So you could look back at whether there's communications about that. Who knew about that? Was there any meddling? Again, I'm ripping off all these, like rifling off all these questions, but these are things that you would look at in those documents. The next part that would matter for the DOJ under Biden and the next topic.
This is only going to get worse for Donald Trump, and thus it will only get worse for J.D. Vance. And honestly, nothing makes me happier, and we are going to continue to cover it all on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, and hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.